Chapter 18. Rousing the Hall. Bloom lived in a small cottage in an East Midlands village. When they arrived on the Sunday in the late afternoon, the village was quiet. The weather was not sufficiently promising to tempt people outdoors, and it was around tea time. Dennis had decided on the direct approach. They would knock on his door and stun him as soon as he opened it. Harry and Ron had called them amateurs, but Dennis knew enough about Bloom to be convinced that any other approach would be overkill. Dennis knocked. Ginny stood to one side of the door, her wand ready but not obvious. There was no reply. No one came to the door. Dennis tried again. After a few seconds they could hear someone coming down the stairs. The door was flung open so quickly they were taken off guard. "What the hell?" Bloom hissed. By this time, Ginny had recovered her wits. There was a small flash of red light, and Bloom toppled over backwards. The two reporters stepped inside and quietly closed the door. "Who is it, Jakey?" came a woman's voice from upstairs. Dennis swore under his breath. Ginny pushed him to one side and stood at the bottom of the stairs. A woman appeared at the top, clad in a bathrobe. "Who the hell are you?" asked Ginny, sounding affronted. "What? I was going to ask you that." "I'm Jacob's girlfriend," Ginny announced. "No, you're not. I am." Dennis appeared round the corner. "Well, I'm his husband," he interjected, then sent a stunning spell up the stairs. The young woman crumpled to the floor. They levitated the two unconscious forms up into the bedroom and onto the bed. "It seems almost a shame to obliviate her," Ginny mused. "I'd love to hear her confront Bloom after finding out he has a husband." Dennis gazed at her. "I'd forgotten how evil you can be," he said. "I like it." Ginny grinned. "I'm glad you do. If you'd protested, I was going to stun you and leave you on the bed with them." Dennis laughed. It came out as quite a nervous laugh. He gave the two recumbent figures a sleeping draught. Then Ginny wiped their memories with a wistful sigh. "I've given him a memory of going to the meeting and being so bored he can't remember any details," she told Dennis. "We might have to add to that after the meeting, but it's a start." Dennis let out a low whistle. "That's pretty advanced stuff." "I learnt from the best," she bragged. Harry, of course," Dennis nodded. "No, George. Harry's okay, being an aura and everything, but George is more imaginative." Ginny took a few hairs from Bloom's head and added them to the phial of polyjuice potion Dennis had given her. Drinking it, she changed into the dark-haired man lying on the bed. "If you'd like to step out of the room, I'll find his robe and get changed." "No need to be shy," Dennis pointed out. "It's his body, not yours." "I know," Ginny grimaced. "But since you said you're his husband, it would feel weird." Dennis stuck out his tongue at her and shut the bedroom door as he left. Bloom had left his robes ready on a hanger in the wardrobe. Ginny was changed a minute later. From Bloom's house they disapparated to another village, about 20 miles away, where Baddock lived. Baddock's house, at first sight, and always to muggles, looked like a derelict manor house. Once they, as magical people, stepped off the road and onto the drive, the house took on a well-kept appearance. They crunched down the neatly raked gravel drive to the front door. Dennis was wary. He had been particularly worried that Baddock might have a house elf as his butler. That could have been a problem. House elf magic was powerful and still something of an unknown quantity. Luckily, a reasonably reliable contact had informed him that the Baddock family elf had taken his liberty under legal reforms originally proposed by Advocate Granger Weasley. He was now in semi-retirement with two house elf colleagues. Baddock had taken on a wizard as his butler, cook, and handyman. Ginny, as Bloom, rang the doorbell. Shortly afterward, the door opened to reveal an elderly man. Over his shoulder they could see Baddock himself. Baddock spoke first. "Jacob, my lad, you're a tad early." The butler took a step back, without a word, to let them in. "Bit of a change of plan, Malcolm," said Ginny in Bloom's voice. This young guy was sent to explain it all. Almost simultaneously, Baddock and the butler were stunned and slumped to the tiled floor of the entrance hall. "You know, I'm starting to believe the little girl when she said it would go all right," said Dennis. "Hominum revelio," said Ginny, holding up her wand. Nothing happened. "Good point," Dennis admitted. "Can't be too careful. I'm actually glad you're with me." "Don't sound so surprised," Ginny said, but Bloom's face smiled with her satisfaction. Dennis gave the butler a sleeping draught and dosed Baddock with Veritaserum. He roused Baddock and hauled him up into a seated position. Baddock looked half asleep. His head lolled to one side, and his eyes appeared not to see anything. "Baddock, can you hear me?" "Yes," he replied in a monotone. "Who is Aloria Rakison?" Ginny asked. "Our new leader." "Where can we find her?" Dennis inquired. "Don't know. Never seen her. Not many have." "What is her plan?" Dennis asked. "Show everybody Muggles are our enemies. Start a war. Stop Muggles threatening us and the planet." "How's she going to do it?" asked Ginny. "She's giving something. Some magic to our captains. Up to them to decide how. That's what the meeting's to talk about, I think." "And what's your part in this?" Ginny probed. "Help now. Run our own counties afterwards. Be sergeants of the new order." Ginny and Dennis looked at each other. "Do you have any special part in the meeting tonight?" Ginny asked for clarification. "No. Just receive orders." Ginny, in the guise of Bloom, gestured to Dennis. Dennis gave Baddock a sleeping draught, plucked a few of his hairs, and added them to another phial of polyjuice. He drank the potion and, once he was in Baddock's shape, changed into his robes. "Should be easy," Ginny said. "Go to the meeting, find out the details, and, if we need to, implant memories into Baddock and Bloom on the way home." Dennis swore. It felt odd swearing in someone else's voice. "Forgot to check if the address we have for the meeting is the right one. Wasn't your contact sure?" Dennis thought about it. "He's pretty reliable. He seemed quite sure." "Well, we'll go. If it's not right, we'll have to come back and ask one of them," Ginny decided. "Ah," Dennis grimaced. "Those sleeping draughts don't have an antidote. We can't ask them anything until it times out." Ginny didn't actually tut and say, "Men," in exasperation. Possibly as well, given that she was a man at that moment. But her look said it all. "The girl, Lydia, said it would be fine. Be optimistic," said Dennis. He received another of those looks from Ginny in return for his motivational speech. Even with someone else's face, she could make her contempt felt. "How long do we have with the polyjuice?" she asked. "Now they will be impressed." Dennis grinned with Baddock's face. "It will last at least 8 hours, and I also have an antidote." Bloom's eyebrows shot up, displaying Ginny's surprise. "You actually are a hell of a potioneer, Dennis," she admitted. "Especially for an idiot." They disapparated to the meeting place in Warwickshire. As they approached the converted chapel, they saw another figure coming from the opposite direction. "Renfield!" Dennis hailed the figure in Baddock's voice as it neared them. "Baddock, Bloom," Renfield replied. "Nice place Welbeck's got here. He's lent it to me. I've been here a while, sorting everything out. Wait until you see inside. Awfully stylish, especially for a gorilla like Welbeck." As they walked up to the new-looking oak door, a voice intoned, "Please place your hands on the door to gain entry." As each of them touched the door with the palm of a hand, their hands were outlined in green light. Once all three had touched it, the door swung smoothly and noiselessly open to admit them. "Even the security's stylish," Renfield grinned. The entrance hall was half-panelled in finely figured wood. Beautiful wizarding paintings hung from the picture rails, portraits of haughty people preening themselves, and landscapes with waving grass and scudding clouds. Renfield led the way into a large, high-ceilinged room. It was clearly larger than the outside of the building itself. They wondered how many other rooms there might be. The floor was filled with tables and chairs, arranged so that the occupants would be either facing or side on to the far end. At that end was a lectern, raised up on a small stage. Many of the tables were already occupied, and a hubbub of good-natured conversation filled the air. Light streamed in through high, stone-mullioned windows. At the base of each window was a vase of flowers, which lent the room a light, sweet fragrance. Ginny and Dennis, or Bloom and Baddock, to any observer present, took a table about halfway down the room. Almost immediately they were joined by another man, putting paid to any possibility of covert conversation between the two infiltrators. "Hi, Jake," the new arrival said. Ginny turned and physically jumped with surprise. "Oh, hi, Blaze," she managed to say with a decent attempt at sounding casual. "Have you met Malcolm Baddock?" "We met at the last meeting," Blaze Zabini frowned. "Oh, right, but... yeah," Ginny stammered. "Malcolm, you remember Blaze Zabini?" "Yes, of course, Jacob," Dennis said with a laugh. "Are you all right? Sorry, Blaze. I think Jink's mind is somewhere else tonight. In bed, possibly." Zabini smirked. "Yes, I've heard you were seeing someone, Jake." "Oh my God, are you blushing?" Dennis and Zabini chatted for a minute. Clearly, thought Ginny, Dennis knew a bit about Baddock. He was speaking differently, and Zabini was not at all surprised by it. Baddock, it seemed, was a member of the county set, well-to-do and more refined than Dennis normally was. Ginny felt exposed. She knew almost nothing about Bloom. She didn't want to say anything in case it was out of character, and gave away their potion-fueled deception. Luckily, or rather cleverly on his part, Dennis was dropping hints in his conversation about Bloom. That Bloom was a serial womanizer, less refined, and well known for his sense of humour, which was clearly failing him tonight. "Perhaps you should take it easy, Jacob," Baddock was saying. "At least for this evening, that is. I doubt there will be an occasion for your sense of humour anyway." "We're about to find out," said Zabini, gesturing towards the lectern. The audience stirred. Then a hush fell across the room. "Here's Renfield," Zabini observed in a whispered tone, which conveyed a mixture of contempt, mild amusement, and resignation. "Ever the master of ceremonies, never around when anything needs doing." "Gentlemen and ladies," he began, nodding to a table of witches a couple of rows back from the raised dais on which the lectern stood. "Thank you all for coming this evening. I've fed back all the points that were raised at the last meeting, at least all the serious points. I'm sure we would all like to thank Jacob Bloom for his entertaining contributions." A ripple of laughter washed across the room. Ginny half stood and took a bow. "I don't know how you get away with it sometimes," Zabini murmured as Bloom sat down again. "And tonight," Renfield resumes, "we have a very special guest who's going to explain the progress that is being made and the next steps which we will be asked to perform. Please give a round of applause for Rabastan Lestrange." Renfield stepped back from the lectern and clapped with theatrical enthusiasm. Ginny watched in horror as a tall, slender man stepped up to the lectern and dropped his hood. She knew his face. He had been one of the Death Eaters they had duelled in the Department of Mysteries so long ago. She hazarded a glance at Dennis. Baddock's knuckles were white as he fought to control himself. She suddenly remembered Dennis had reported on the hearings a few years before, when several former Death Eaters had been considered for parole from Azkaban, including Jugson, McNair, Travers, and Lestrange himself. He had been horrified by the release of former Death Eaters, and had written a powerful piece on why they should remain in prison. His editor had disallowed the article. There had been mutterings about ministry interference at the time. Harry had been equally horrified at Rabastan Lestrange being put back on the streets. There had been accusations of harassment a few months later, when it emerged that auras had been tailing Lestrange. "Welcome, brothers and sisters," Lestrange said in a quiet, calm voice. The room immediately hushed into an almost reverent silence. I am heartened to see so many of you here this evening. It makes me glad to see that so many of our small community wish to save our future. So many of us want to go on living in a world which muggles want to destroy, which muggles want to fill with their rubbish, their poisons, their hatred. So many of us reject the ministry's policy of appeasing our muggle oppressors. So many of us are ready to use our gifts to save the world. Yet still the ministry opposes the wishes of its own people. Still it sides with the interests of the same creatures that hold us back. Still it makes us squirm and hide from their gaze, cowering from their spy satellites, which constantly seek to sneak into our homes, our lives, our privacy. We are sick of it. We are the generation that rid the world of Lord Voldemort to save Muggle lives. We are the people who fought, who lost friends and loved ones, so that Muggles could sleep easily in their beds. We made sacrifices for them. And how do they repay us? With gratitude? With kindness? With peace? No. All around us, our world is being broken down. Our world is shrinking. Our world is being destroyed. Unless we act soon and act decisively, it will be too late to save ourselves. Too late to save them. Too late, perhaps, to save life on our planet. By this time, the room was filled with an angry buzzing. Although Ginny and Dennis did not like what was being said, nor where it was leading, it was hard to fault the truth behind the statements being made. The world was being used up and defiled. It did feel as though the Muggle world was pressing in around them. Nearly half, Rabastan Lestrange continued, half of everything the Ministry does now is aimed at keeping the prying eyes of the Muggle world away from us. When the Statute of Secrecy was proposed centuries ago, it was easy to keep the two worlds apart. But now they make it a struggle for us to protect them, and they do nothing in return. Think about it. They have not declared war on us. They know that we have the strength to retaliate if they did. But look at them. Look at their actions. They are waging war on us every day. The room was vocally angry by now. Some voices were calling out their grievances about the Muggles. Others shouted in agreement, yet others muttered threats towards the Muggles. Rabastan held up his hands and waited for the noise to subside. "My friends," he resumed, "my brothers, my sisters, my people, I hear you when you say this cannot go on. I hear you when you say this must not go unchallenged. I hear you when you say our enemies must be opposed and turned aside from the course of destruction they are on. But know one thing. We cannot oppose these enemies if we do not stand united. For the magical world to survive, the magical world must unite. So, we have to ask ourselves, how do we unite? What is the feeling that unites us all? There is a feeling we all share. Something all magical people know. Something most Muggles know. Something we all feel. It is that a world run by Muggles, by the worst Muggles, by the most short-sighted, nature-hating, money-loving Muggles, does not work. Cheering erupted across the room. Rabastan had them on his side, even in the palm of his hand. He lowered his voice again and began to speak, as though pained by what he was saying. Muggles were once happy to run their world, and we were happy to keep ours. He stopped and sighed. Now they take everything. They push nature aside, they tear down forests, they poison the seas and the air. They want to be everywhere, see everything, control everyone. We have a statute of secrecy. It tells us to keep out of their way and leave them alone. that is getting harder to do. We are putting so much effort into hiding from them. For what? For their peace of mind. And do they have peace of mind? No. Their own people are worked harder than ever, are more anxious, are more dissatisfied than ever. They themselves think their own leaders are going too far. And this latest move of theirs proves it. You may have heard the rumours. They have found a way, a technology, which lets them make their own people magical. These rumours are true. There was fear and anger on the floor of the meeting now. A raw uproar began to rise. Rabastan waited a few moments, seemingly gauging how widespread the feeling was. The secrecy and separation we have maintained for centuries, for their benefit, is being cast aside by their actions, with powers copied from ours, and their stupidity. What can we expect for the world? Again he paused, watching his audience, and dialed down his tone once again. All we are asking you to do, my magical brothers and sisters, is to go back to your communities, confirm the rumours, and tell your friends the things we have spoken about tonight. Tell them that the leaders of the Muggles are breaking our vows of secrecy. Tell them that even the majority of Muggles simply do not want this. Tell them that we need to unite to save the Muggles, to save nature, to save the world from these dangerous leaders of theirs. Meanwhile, we will continue our quest to get the Ministry and other magical governments around the world to persuade the Muggle leaders to abandon their attempt to copy our powers for their gain. We can only hope this works, and soon. Otherwise, the day may come when we have to emerge from the shadows and use our powers to free the Muggles from their leaders. The day may come when we have to lead the Muggles onto a new, less destructive path for the sake of our world and theirs. The Strange stood tall and still for a few moments, looking like a heroic statue, while the muttering passed in waves around the room. But now, he said at last, I believe refreshments are being served. Please stay if you can. I and my colleagues will be on hand if you have any questions. Zabini pursed his lips and nodded. I have to say, makes a lot of sense. I was sceptical about coming tonight, but I'd heard the rumours. Even without the Muggle leaders having magic at their disposal, things have been starting to look as though they're getting out of hand. It's a good message that it's not all Muggles that are the problem, just their elites. Yes, said Dennis with Baddock's voice. I thought that came over well. He gave Bloom's foot a kick under the table, to let Ginny know to go along with what he was saying. A waiter put a tray of snacks and drinks on the table with a smile and a nod. Steering the Muggles along a different path, especially if we are united, Dennis continued, seems much more likely to succeed than going head-to-head with the whole Muggle world. It does, Zabini agreed. I hope there is time for us all to unite first. Well, Jacob and I will do what we can to spread the word. Bloom's head nodded in agreement. But I'm afraid we are going to have to forego the refreshments, Dennis said. Jacob has pressing matters to address at home. Baddock stood, and Bloom followed. Good to see you, Zabini, Baddock's voice said. I hope to see you again soon. Please convey our support to Mr. Lestrange, if you get the chance to mingle. Good evening. Bye, Ginny said with Bloom's voice, and moved to follow Baddock from the room.